So, you know when someone's really, really, really a professional at something, when they can make it get the timing just right. Which is why, when Stephanie and I originally sat down to design this whole book, what is currently session 4, she said, "Are you crazy? That's never going to get done in one session. That you need 2 sessions for that." And I said, No, we can get it done in 1 session. So the good news is we're exactly on time based on where Stephanie said we would be at this point when I said, no, we'll get it all done in 1 session. But what we're actually going to do is we're going to do half of what is booked for session 4 in session 4, and half of what is booked for session 4 in session 5, which was supposed to be just Q&A. And we're going to work our way through this, and there'll be Q&A and a whole interactive discussion. So we are right on time. We're right on time the way Stephanie said we would be until I overrode her and said, no, put it all in session 4. All right. For whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. Those of you who know me pretty well, I'm not a religious person, but I do study my history. And I study a lot of religious teachings from the historical standpoint, and because they tend to express a lot of universal principles. And what I interpret, whatever a man soweth, that shall he also reap, basically means what you put out into the world is what you're going to get. And I think that there's a binary way to look at this, and one way I think is right, and the other way I think is wrong. And you might not agree with me, but this is what I believe. And I believe that it is right to put out good things into the world, because when you put out good things into the world, good things tend to come back to you. What goes around comes around. Yes? If you don't think about it too much, what comes around goes around sounds just like what goes around comes around. And people use these two phrases interchangeably. What goes around comes around means if I put out good things into the world, good things will come back to me and the people I care about. What comes around goes around means that if bad things happen to come my way, that's justification to put bad shit, just pass the bad shit on to other people. I think one of the greatest things about building any kind of a business, law firm, really any kind of a business, but a law firm in particular, is we have the ability to make a great living. And I don't care if you have a multi-million-dollar firm like some people in the room, a $1 million firm like some people in the room, a $500,000 firm, a $250,000 firm. The fact remains, it's kind of hard to really take yourself too seriously whining and complaining about being broke when you have the ability to make more in 1 hour than most people, forget about in the world. Let's even limit it down to most people in this country. Most people in this country, it takes them a whole week to earn as much as every single one of you, any one of you, can make in an hour. Am I telling the truth? So, if you really do the math on it, it's something like if you were to take the numbers are just staggering when you really stack it all together. I need someone to help me with the math. What's Brad, Larry, someone. What's minimum wage today? Does anyone know? It's different in every state, right? I'm sorry? $15 an hour, let's say? Higher, lower, lower. 12, 10, 7. What is it in Seattle? In Seattle, it's 15. Can we just say 10 as a national average? 7 in Georgia, fine. But let's just say 10 as a national average. Okay, guys, you're just making it worse for yourself. You're just making it worse for yourself. You really want to go with 15. You really want to go with 15, but we'll go with 10 to call that the national average, all right? And is there anyone in the room who can't generate, and I don't care whether you bill by the hour or flat fee or value-based or contingency, if you were to really figure out how much revenue you generate in an hour of effort, is there anyone here who isn't generating at least $250 an hour? Can we all go with 200? 250? 250, we're good with 250? All right. What's the percentage difference between $10 an hour and $250 an hour? How much? 250 is how much percent more than 10? 250%. Is it 250%? It's 25%. 25 times. It's 25 times. You multiply 10 times 25, 25 times 10 gets you $250 an hour, right? So a person who's making $10 an hour, which, a lot of people who we interact with on a daily basis are making $10 an hour, right? $10 an hour times 40 hours a week is $400. I can do that. And $400 a week times, let's say, 46 weeks a year what's 400 times 46? 18,400. All right? 18,400 times 25 is how much? $460,000 a year. Sorry? No, $18,000 a year times 25. 250 is 25 times $10 an hour. You are all capable of earning $250 per hour. Got it? The vast majority of people who you're interacting with on a daily basis, the people who you are trying to avoid their judgments, you want to avoid their criticisms, you want to avoid their insults, you want to avoid all of their opinions of you. They're earning $18,000 to, let's say, $25,000 a year, and you could be you're earning 25 times what they earn per hour. That means in 40 hours a week, 46 weeks a year, that's $400 and something thousand. Now, why don't you earn at least $400,000 a year? That's bullshit, what you just said. That's bullshit, respectfully. That's a story you've made up. The reason that you don't earn $400,000 a year is because you tolerate things that prevent you from earning $400,000 a year. You get to whatever your financial set point is and you stop. And you let people get in your way. Because if someone got in the way of you being able to make enough to pay your mortgage, you'd run right over them. If someone got in the way of you being able to make enough money to pay for your kids' college tuition, you'd run right over them. Well, once you've got what you've decided you need, you stop. And you tolerate people, places, things, habits, routines, stories, excuses. You tolerate a bunch of bullshit, And that's what stops you from earning at least $400,000 a year. Not all of those hours are billable. Why not? Because you don't bill for them. That's why not. Because you don't get money in the trust account up front, and then you have accounts receivables problems. That's why not. Because you don't know how to actually sell legal services. You've never taken a single course in your life on how to sell legal services. If truth be told, you're probably pretty uncomfortable selling legal services. And so you don't get the right clients. You don't stand up for and defend the right terms and standards. And you take shit from people who you ought not be taking shit from, but for the fact that you have fear of not being able to get the next client. You're afraid of not being able to get the next client, and so you take clients you probably shouldn't take. And then you're afraid of putting a marketing message out there that might offend people or cause people to judge you or criticize you, and so your marketing is lackluster and doesn't perform very well. You're afraid of having the kinds of honest conversations you need to have with prospective new clients who come to see you, and they don't make intelligent decisions. And you let them walk out the door with the same problem they came in with. And then you tell yourself all these stories to make it seem okay. But if we're being really completely objective and honest about it, you've wasted this person's time. They came in looking for a solution, hoping you would be able to give them some clarity, hoping you'd be able to guide them through a process of making a courageous, intelligent, informed decision. And because you weren't willing, maybe because you didn't know how, but because you tolerate not knowing how, you continue to not know how, to have this conversation in an open, honest, authentic, comfortable, cards on the table way. And that same person who walked in the door looking for a solution, hoping for a solution, walks out with the same exact problem they came into your office with, except now they got 2 hours less of their life because they spent it going to see you. You see, there's two main problems that I think most of you probably have going on in your business, just strictly from a mechanical standpoint. One main problem you've got is you don't have any kind of real standards with your staff, with the people who work for you. And so you've got people who don't perform, and you've got people who work for you who don't meet their billable hour quotas, and you've got people who you are afraid to even have a conversation with them about what are the minimum standards, because at the end of the day, you're afraid of having an honest conversation about what are the minimum standards, because once you have the conversation, what are the minimum standards, now you're terrified that they might fall short of those minimum standards, and you might have to actually create a consequence for them to fall short of their own commitments to themselves. You see how messed up this is? I'm your employer. I want to help you make more money. I'm your employer. I want to help you achieve your financial, personal, and professional goals. This job is going to help you achieve those financial, personal, and professional goals. I will hold up my end of the bargain as your employer and give you the tools and give you the resources and give you the training and give you the guidance and give you the opportunities and give you the money if you hold up your end of the bargain and meet these standards that we are agreeing to. But you're afraid to have that conversation because what if they don't meet their standards? What if they don't hold up their end of the bargain? What if they don't meet the standards that you set? And you're afraid of what happens next, and so you avoid this entire conversation to begin with. Consequently, you are not really managing anyone. It's like pushing gelatin. Problem number 2. And this is strictly mechanical, right? See, law firms are so simple to run. Problem number 2. You don't have clear standards with your clients. You're afraid of the consequences of telling your clients the truth. Because if you tell your prospective new client the truth about what it's really going to cost to solve their problem, you're afraid they'll reject you. You're afraid that if you tell the client the truth about the stories they're telling you, which are almost all bullshit, you're afraid that if you tell them the truth about the stories they're telling you, they won't like you. And so they go somewhere else. And they go somewhere else because while you think you're preventing them from disliking you by not calling them on their bullshit, what you're really doing is teaching them not to trust you. They either distrust you because they think that you know that what they're saying is bullshit and won't tell them the truth, or they distrust you because they think you're not smart enough to recognize that what they're telling you is bullshit. And if that's the case, how can I possibly trust you to represent me in this case if you can't see through this bullshit? And you've got these goals of having $1 million firm or a $5 million firm or a $10 million firm. The problem isn't with your goals. The problem is with your standards. Because goals are what you're aiming for, but the standards are what you're tolerating. We've got to spend less time talking about our goals and more time talking about and thinking about our standards. So on page 30 here, I gave a few examples. My goal is to fly by private jet every time I travel. That is my goal. Sorry? You what?
I looked at it already and I love it.
Kristen loves this. I'm sorry, Megan loves this. My goal is to fly by private jet every time I travel. That is my goal. Until I reach my goal, my minimum standard will be to fly by first class commercial, except when flying by first class commercial requires a whole bunch of stops, and flying on an Embraer puddle jumper gets me there quicker. Right? I'm not just going to fly from Miami to Dallas, sit around for 2 hours, and then get on a plane and fly from Dallas to Tennessee just so I can say I flew first class and it's a 7-hour flight, when I can get on a plane in Miami and fly in a little puddle jumper where I can barely fit, and I'm not even that big, and get directly to Tennessee, lickety-split. So I'm not going to put an arbitrary standard on there because my time is more valuable to me than going around pretending like first class matters. My goal is to work out 5 days a week with a personal trainer, but until I reach that goal, my minimum standard is to eat healthy, go to a group fitness class at least once a week, and eating junk food falls below my standard. Pretty simple, right? Does that mean I never eat junk food? No, I eat junk food all the time. But when I do, I don't lie to myself. I acknowledge I am falling, I am I am allowing myself to fall below my standards. And then when I don't lose weight, I don't go around blaming the economy for it. Everyone got the analogy there, right? My goal is to live in a 7,500 square foot house with a minimum of 2 guest bedrooms in a safe neighborhood, no more than 15 minutes from the school my children attend. While I build the financial means for that house, my minimum standard will be a 3,000 square foot house with 3 bedrooms, 3.5 baths in a safe neighborhood, but living in an apartment would fall below my standards. As an example. Does everyone understand the construct that we're trying to set up here? Okay. I'm not trying to impose these values on anyone. I'm trying to illustrate a point. So, page 32. Oh, I'm supposed to be clicking on this clicker. Is your standard going to be wearing one Rolex watch, or will your standards be to have a collection of 3 Timex watches? I want you to understand, I cannot overemphasize how much I don't give a shit which answer you come up with. It's your watch. It's your life. What I do care about, very much so, is that you're clear, intentional, and deliberate about what your standards are. So what are your standards? Raise your hand if your standard is 1 Rolex. Raise your hand if your standard is 3 Timex. There you go. Is your standard going to be an entry-level Porsche Macan, retail price $49,000, bare bones stripped down, or a top-of-the-line, fully loaded, limited edition Toyota 4Runner, also $49,000? Assuming that we're talking about SUVs. Come on. Don't work hard to miss the point. Okay, well, I'll tell you where I got this idea from. I got this idea because I was having a conversation with someone who will remain nameless, and this person had a salesperson who was a rock star. And this member's salesperson, who was a rock star, her goal was to get a BMW. And she figured that she could get an entry-level BMW, and it was whatever, like $45,000 for the entry-level BMW that she wanted. However, her wife went apeshit when she came home and said, I'm going to get an entry-level BMW. Why? Because we're not the kind of people who drive BMWs. Those kind of people drive BMWs. So her wife was perfectly okay with her getting a top-of-the-line Volkswagen, which was more expensive than the entry-level BMW, because we're the kind of people who can drive Volkswagens. We're not the kind of people who drive BMWs. You understand? Would you rather go on vacation and stay at a Ritz-Carlton for 1 week, or for the same price, stay at a Motel 6 for 3 weeks? Who's staying at the Ritz for 1 week? Who's staying at the Motel 6 for 3 weeks? No one who will raise their hand. You see, I just want you to start to become intentional about your standards. For real. Like, I don't care what you decide. I just want you to be honest with yourselves, because it's a lot easier for me to help you achieve your honest goals than for me and my team to help you achieve your dishonest goals. Would you rather have 5 A clients or 50 C clients? 5 A clients, raise your hand. 50 C clients, raise your hand. Hey. So, page 39. And I love this quote. When you set your standards and stick to them, there will be people in your life who fall away. When that happens, let them. Yes?
Question, RJon. You said in the intro here, goals are what you're aiming for, standards are what you're tolerating.
Yes.
But when we're going through this exercise here of Timex versus Rolex and all that, it sounds like we're playing a bad game of would you rather. It sounds like you're asking, is your goal the Rolex, and are you tolerating the Timexes right now? Is that the question that you're asking instead of what your standard is going to be? Because, yeah, I'd love the Rolex. That's my goal. But standard, what I've got to tolerate right now until I can get that is, well, whatever this is.
I don't know. If your minimum standard is a Rolex, for example, if your minimum standard is a Rolex, and just for the record, so you all know, I don't even own a Rolex. I'm just not like a watch person. If your minimum standard is a Rolex, and let's say a Rolex is $1,000, and let's say you can get a top-of-the-line Timex or Seiko or something like that for around $250, $300, something like that. If you spend $300 for one Seiko or one top-of-the-line Timex, well, now you still have to save up $1,000 to get a Rolex. And if you buy a second Timex, well, now you got 2 Timex or Seikos or whatever, and you still have to get $1,000 for a Rolex. Let me see if I can put this in different terms that are much more personal to me, okay? My standard for a boat used to be a 19-foot center console with no bathroom and no roof and no nothing. My standard for a boat is now much higher than that. My minimum standard for a boat is I got to have at least twin engines. I got to have a real bathroom where an actual adult can go and have an actual toilet with running water and a hot water shower and a little place with air conditioning for Taille, and it's got to be able to get me to the Bahamas safely. That's my minimum standard. Got it?
Okay.
So for the last several years, every year I've gone to the boat show, and every year I said to Allie, why don't we just buy a 19-foot boat? I mean, we could write a check and just walk out of here with the boat, and then we could at least get out on the water. Because that's below our standards. I'd rather have no boat than less than my minimum standards. What is your minimum standard with regard to anything in your life?
Take the car, for example.
What's your minimum standard when it comes to a car?
I got my truck right now. 2012 Toyota Tacoma.
What is your
I'm
minimum
happy.
standard with regard to a car?
Well, I know what my goal is.
I didn't ask
Okay,
you
what
what
my
your
standard
goal
is until I reach my goal, my standard is...
Let me stop you for a second.
Okay.
Let me stop you for a second. You're falling into the exact trap that this exercise is designed to help you navigate your way out of.
Okay.
Okay? What is your minimum standard when it comes to an automobile?
I guess what I've got right now.
I'm just asking you to
Okay.
define your minimum standard when it comes to an automobile. And by the way, I fully appreciate that this is excruciating because most people never take one single second of their lives to think about this stuff, much less write it down. And the reason we're talking about cars and houses and domestic services and all of this stuff is because this stuff is relatively easy. We're then going to start talking about minimum standards when it comes to a receptionist, and minimum standards when it comes to a marketing system, and minimum standards when it comes to policies and procedures in your firms. See, the reason that your firms are as fucked up as they are is because you don't have any minimum standards. You've got goals, but you've got no minimum standards. So things can get bad, and they can go from bad to worse, and they can go from worse to even more horrible, and there's no floor. It's like you're just drowning with your eye on the star of the goal without any minimum standards. And that's why you'll tolerate the shit you tolerate from your staff, and that's why you'll tolerate the shit you tolerate from your vendors, and that's why you'll tolerate the shit you tolerate from your bookkeepers, and that's why you'll tolerate the shit you tolerate from the people producing your slow-mo fucking videos with you petting horses. And that's why you'll tolerate the shit you tolerate from your clients. And that's why you'll tolerate all the stuff you tolerate. Because you've got no standards. See the problem?
Yes, I think the light bulb just went on, the fact that my standards that I'm tolerating is what I've got right now. And I'm looking at that goal thinking that's where I've got to be, as opposed to, shit, I'm still just tolerating with whatever I've got right now.
So if your minimum standard, for example, is the Ritz-Carlton, if your minimum standard is, for example, the Ritz-Carlton, and you say, well, I want to go on vacation, but we can only afford Motel 6. You know what? Respectfully, I'd rather just stay home. Why? Because I will not, because that's below my standards. I just won't do it. If your minimum standard is a Rolex, and the most that your budget can afford right now is a Timex, you know what? I'd rather just not wear a watch. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So if you'll do this exercise and kind of play along with me, and get up and go to the mic as you need to, just like we did with the last two sessions, and we can talk this through if you get stuck, and I fully expect you will. What's the minimum you will tolerate in terms of the house you live in? What's the minimum you will tolerate in terms of the house you live in?
Okay. So with vacation or watch, you don't need a vacation or a watch, but you need a house.
So what's the minimum you'll tolerate in terms of the house you live in?
Well, I'm tolerating the house that I live in right now because I live there, right?
Will you tolerate something worse?
I guess I would, yeah. But I don't understand what tolerate means.
I bet you wouldn't.
I mean, I'd bitch and moan about it, but
No,
I could
I
live
bet
there.
that as much as you will make excuses and as much as you will procrastinate and as much as you will put up with, I bet that if push came to shove and you had to move your family into a worse house, you would say, fuck that, pay me.
Yes.
Because you won't go below your minimum standard.
So the house I live in now is my minimum standard.
I don't know. Would you live somewhere worse? What would you do?
No, I think you're right. I wouldn't live somewhere worse. You're right.
What would you do to prevent your family from having to live in a worse house?
I would make them pay me.
There you go. If it was a question of having a conversation with your staff that's very, very uncomfortable, or your family moving into a worse house, what would you do?
I would have the conversation.
Okay. You just won't have that conversation to move into a better house. Why? because your standard is where it is instead of being higher.
Okay, I think I understand.
Okay? So everyone just write down, what are your minimum standards for the house you live in, for the house you will live in. I will not live in a house that falls below this standard. Erica, would you come up here for a minute? If someone would like to go up to the microphone and share a standard, I'd be happy to help you think it all the way through. Otherwise, you're on to minimum standards for the car you drive. See, Allie and I have different minimum standards for the car that I'll drive. And this is the problem. Yes.
Okay. So I have 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, a large kitchen, large closets, no bugs, hardwood floors, granite countertops, and a good school district.
What's large?
When you say large, big enough to fit my clothes in the closet, and in the kitchen I like to cook, so I need enough room to put my pots and pans and food on the countertops.
Well, I can fit your pots and pans in this kitchen. I'm just going to jam them into a corner.
No.
What's large?
You need like a square footage?
Yeah.
Never really measured a kitchen, but
When you're developing policies, when you're developing procedures, when you're creating systems so your business runs on systems, you've got to be specific with your staff. You can't tell them large.
gotcha.
So imagine you sent me out to go find a house for you. You know me, you like me, you trust me, you know that I have your best interest at heart, you know I will be as diligent as I possibly can. You've now set me up for failure with this definition of what I should be looking for in a house for you.
Gotcha.
Because my idea of a large kitchen might be different than your idea of a large kitchen. And I might get you a house with my idea of a large kitchen, and then you're like pissed because I'm paying too much in rent or I'm paying too much in a mortgage because my idea of a kitchen, I mean, my kitchen is about 1,000 square feet in my house.
Okay. That's large.
Not according to, Jen Gore. Jen Gore's kitchen is bigger.
Gotcha.
You see my point? Mm-hmm. But this is the way we've got to be clear in our thinking. We've got to be intentional in our communications. We can't expect people to really respect our standards if we don't define what those standards are.
Gotcha. Makes
Got
sense.
it? Okay. Holly?
Okay, so I want to talk about cars. You said earlier and just now, you referenced how you and Allie have a different standard
For cars.
for cars. So I don't want this to turn into like marriage counseling. I don't know if this is a good question, but so how do you navigate that? But like reconciling, deciding what our minimum standards are, and Erica's sessions about, you want the car, just put it in the budget, make it happen, hustle, do the actions and the thoughts and make it happen.
Right.
And I don't necessarily want to put Jeff on my list of negative people to take out of my life, just just because he doesn't want a Maserati, but I want a Maserati.
Does he have to drive the Maserati?
No.
Well, then it's really not his problem.
Well, so why don't you have the car that you want?
Okay. You want the long answer or the short answer?
I want the answer, the real answer.
The real answer is because I really like to have sex with Allie. That's the real answer.
Okay. Well,
right.
so what was the long one?
All right. The more complete The more complete answer is my standard for the car that I want has to do with how cool it is, how much fun it is, how much it inspires me. Her standard is how safe is it?
Right.
My car is a 1966 Mustang Fastback Retro Mod. Her standard is, fuck you, you're not putting my kid in a car without airbags.
Okay.
So, we have to make compromises. There's a lot of personal stuff that when you share your life with a person, you make compromises, right?
Right.
But you don't have to make compromises when it comes to the clients you take. You don't have to make compromises when it comes to how your staff must perform in order to keep their jobs. You don't have to make compromises when it comes to the performance of your bookkeeper.
Right. Yes, I agree, and I get all that, and I agree. So can we just put on the record that when we're talking about the more personal stuff, we're not doing it in a vacuum. It's not just like, I want this, so I'm going to put it in the budget, I'm going to put it in the plan, I'm going to make it happen. There's a lot of other things that have to go into those types of things, types of desires.
There are certain things that, because you're in a marriage where you have decided to share a life together and you have children together, you have to take the other person's feelings into account. I mean,
Right.
You don't have to. You're a divorce lawyer, you know that. But,
Right.
If you want to have a happy marriage, you take the other person's feelings into account.
Right,
And
okay.
in all seriousness about the car, I respect the fact that Allie is very uncomfortable about me driving that car. And so, out of respect for her, I drive
A new Tesla.
an extremely uninspiring
Yes,
Tesla.
right. Okay.
I'm not saying it shouldn't inspire you, it just doesn't inspire me. I just said, a 1966 Mustang Fastback Retro Mod. I can't make it more clear. Bullet green, come on. Black interior. I can show you pictures on my phone. Every time I pass one, I take a picture. And she says, no, 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 no. Yes.
Okay, so I just wanted to see if I'm getting this right, or maybe I need to move up my standards or something. So right now, it's about a car. I drive a 2013 Yukon that is paid for, that was actually given to me.
Why don't we forget about whatever you're driving
Okay. But,
and just define what your minimum standard is?
well, that's my...
If what you're driving now falls below what you want your minimum standard to be, then you know what you have to do. You have to get rid of the car and get a car that meets your minimum standards.
Okay.
This is the part that's so hard, everyone. I fully appreciate that this is the part that's excruciating. Because I'm asking you to let go of all of the current points of reference you have in your life. Mm-hmm. See, this is exactly the problem with building. I had a conversation with someone years ago, And this person came to me and they had built a law firm. When they started working with us, they were like $180,000, $200,000 a year. A few years later, they're at $1.5 million. And they're like, we feel like we know everything there is to know about running $1.5 million firm. What's next? Like, how can you help us? They were essentially saying, we don't think you can help us anymore. And I said, is it your intention to continue having a $1.5 million firm? And they said, no, we would like to have a $3 million firm. And I said, well, describe to me what a $3 million firm is going to be like. Define what the standards are for a $3 million firm. And they couldn't. They just kept they defined a $3 million firm essentially as two $1.5 million firms. It's sort of like saying I have a 3-year-old and having a 6-year-old is like having two 3-year-olds. But this is, you're all laughing, but this is what happens, right? Because you tend to define the standards you want to keep based on the standards you're currently tolerating.
Okay.
Erase what you're tolerating and just tell me if you had no car, what would your minimum standards for a car be?
You're gonna shut me up, but you're gonna shut me up, but I was gonna say if I could afford it, my standard.
Let's say you can.
Okay, then my standard would
Minimum standard
would be an Audi Q7.
Okay, don't talk brand.
Okay.
Don't talk standards.
Okay.
My minimum Allie's minimum standard was it's got to have airbags, driver, passenger airbags. It's got to have anti-lock brakes. It's got to have a warranty, and it's got to have like a really great crash safety record. Anything that meets these minimum standards, she was okay with.
Well, that's mine as well.
Then that's your standard.
Okay.
Does your Yukon have driver passenger airbags?
Yes.
Does it have anti-lock brakes?
Yes.
Does it meet the crash safety thing?
I think it does.
Let's just say it does.
Okay.
Well, then great. Then it meets your standards.
Okay. So
Do your standards also include that it be under warranty?
yes.
Is your Yukon under warranty?
No.
Well, then it doesn't meet your standards, and that means you need to get rid of the Yukon and get something that has driver passenger airbags, anti-lock brakes, meets whatever the minimum crash safety rating is, and
Warranty.
under warranty. You see how simple that is?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I guess I was just confusing what my goal is versus that should be.
That's the trick. That's the trap everyone falls into. This is exactly the point. This is why you can work and 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 work, and you never really get anywhere because you're chasing a goal, but it's not until you put a minimum standard in there that you actually elevate yourself.
Right.
You could be sitting down in a pile of shit, looking up at a goal and telling everyone who will listen, I want that goal, I want that goal, I want that goal. But until you raise your minimum standard to something higher than a pile of shit, you're not going to get up out of the pile of shit.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
Yes.
I think I'm understanding what you're saying, so I just want to say it and make sure I'm right. Is what if you'd rather have nothing than have less than the standards. So, for example, for me, for a car, I don't have a car. I haven't had a car since 2000, and I won't have a car unless it's, Maserati or something like that. That's my standard. Otherwise, I'm not even going to bother with the car.
On page 84, there's a quote by Tony Robbins. What changes people is when their shoulds become musts. So I'm going to paraphrase that. What actually grows your business is when your goals turn into your minimum standards. I should have a car with 2 airbags and anti-lock brakes that's under warranty. I should. That's nice. I should do a lot of things. My minimum standard is I must have nothing less than a car with whatever I just said. As soon as your goal becomes your standard, you only have two choices. You know what those two choices are, everyone, don't you? Yes or yes. And when your only choices are yes by yes, yes or yes, you find a way to make it happen. And this was Erica's point to you when we were talking about the Tercel or whatever you got versus the Tesla that you want. When you get the Tesla, you'll find a way to pay for the Tesla. I assure you, you'll find a way to pay for the Tesla. It's not like there aren't a million opportunities to increase your income to pay for the Tesla. But until you have that need, it's easy to just not do it. That's not your turn. I just wanted to make that point. Your minimum standard used to be a 400 or 500 square foot apartment or wherever that thing was.
Right.
Now that you're in your new apartment, which is amazing, I've seen pictures of it, can you ever go back?
I will never go back.
You could never go back.
Not a chance.
You will always find a way to figure out, to have that as your minimum standard.
Correct.
You raise your standard. It's just that simple.
Simple things are hard for me.
I didn't say it was easy. I said it was simple. Okay?
Okay.
All right. Yes.
All right, thank you, RJon. So I think I understand that this is kind of an exercise in honesty and clarity. And so if say I suspend my reference points for what it is that I'm doing now, and I define what my minimum standard is, and then I find that I'm living below that minimum standard. So for instance, you made a reference earlier about food, and that junk food was below your minimum standard. So you've established the minimum standard.
I tell myself that, but then my actions demonstrate something otherwise.
Okay. So I guess that was kind of my question. So when you are honest enough with yourself to establish the minimum standard and recognize that you're living below that, how do you then hold yourself accountable to it? Or do, like what you're saying, like, well, actually my minimum standard is junk food is okay, but I just tell myself that it's not.
That's what coaches are for. Mm-hmm. That's what coaches are for. That's what outside advisors are for. That's what boards of directors are for. Mm-hmm. That's what policies are for. They're to establish what the minimum standards are. That's what your business plan is for. And then your coach, your CEO, your COO, your CFO, your spouse or significant other, or whoever can hold you accountable, they are there to let you know when you are falling below your minimum standard.
Okay.
Now, if you are a person of integrity and they bring it to your attention that you're falling below your minimum standard, you step up and you do better.
All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Hey, RJon. So I sort of see this as kind of like a lifestyle creep situation, how your standards do creep up and things that seem to be out of reach seems to be the minimum goal. And as a story to illustrate, I was at my son's college when his first year of college, and he was having a fraternity party for parents weekend or something. And he's like, I said, well, I can buy some beer. And he said, don't worry, Mom, we got 1,000 cans of Natty Light. And I said, son, I make far too much money to drink Natty Light. And that's the situation, like I was thinking about when you were talking.
What is Natty Light?
Natural light.
Oh, natural light.
Yeah, it's
Natty Light. Got it.
Yeah. Yeah, but
How quaint.
but the things that we would have accepted in college, we wouldn't accept now. The $5 pizzas, things like that. Like we wouldn't eat like that now. So what I see is my lifestyle creep. I now have dry cleaning pickup at my house. And it's probably way more expensive than what it was to drive down the street to get it. But I wouldn't change now because the convenience has been far too dramatic for me. Also, my home that I have now, is a 1-minute commute from my office in a live, work, play community that enhances my life. So that's my minimum until I want to go somewhere else. I'm not willing to leave that situation. I am, flying. Comfort Plus is the lowest I'll go in any route. The kind of makeup I use, the wine that I'll be willing to drink, the beer that I'm willing to drink, the person that I'm willing to date, the health, like good health insurance. That's a minimum now. That is an absolute minimum, and I buy it for myself and for my firm. Facials, massages, those are the standard.
You have exactly the right idea. And what I'm asking you to do with this exercise, what I'm asking everyone to do with this exercise, is to, instead of in our personal lives, we do this basically on whim. What I want to do is help you do it more than just on whim, more than just on taste, more than just on feeling, more than just on preference. I want you to have the experience of defining a policy. This is my minimum standard in objective terms that I can be held accountable for, right? So let's just talk about beer, for example, right? How would you define your minimum standards when it comes to beer?
So it would either has to be an import or a good craft beer.
What does good mean?
Okay, well, let's take that back. A craft beer, not just a domestic.
Import or craft?
Correct.
Okay, so let's take this for a second. I'm your employee. You give me the assignment of procuring beer for you. You give me the policy that the policy of this firm is we only drink import or craft beer. I go out and I bring you back Budweiser. I've clearly violated your minimum standard.
Correct.
I go out and I bring you an import, which is, what's an import that's like worse than Budweiser? What? I bring you an import that's, let's just say, objectively worse than Budweiser. And you raise hell. How dare you? Your judgment is flawed. I gotta fire you. This one's gotta go. How many of you have said, this one's gotta go? You're up at the mic. This one's gotta go. That one's gotta go. The next one's gotta go. Everyone's gotta go. Hey, look, you gave me the policy. You wrote it down in objective terms. You said the minimum standard is import or
Craft beer.
Craft beer. This beer is imported. You have no business complaining that I did my job the way that your policy instructed me to do my job. If you have
Which tells me I need to revise my policy and put it needs to be one of these imports, one of these craft beers.
Or it needs to be an import that has at least a certain alcohol rating, or an import that meets some other qualification or objective.
No wine less than 92 wine spectator points.
There you go. But this is what we see going on in your firms. You've got these loosey-goosey standards, and your staff can't read your mind, and so they're constantly disappointing you, and you're spending a fortune. This one's got to go, and that one's got to go, and I'm frustrated with this, and I'm pissed off with that. But you never actually write down a standard that anyone can actually work with.
Yes, I definitely get that. The KPIs, and that's what we're really working on this quarter, getting the KPIs so that things can be measured, so that performance can be measured against what both sides know is supposed to be a standard.
That's what this exercise is meant to help you do.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
I have so many problems, I don't know which one to talk about.
Let's go in alphabetical order.
What's interesting is I have like laid out procedures and client agreements that they sign when they retain us, and I've set these standards, and then I don't hold them to them.
Because those aren't really your standards. Those are your
And
goals.
that's what I'm trying to figure out, why am I doing that? I know it makes the
Because you're
staff
setting
miserable.
goals. Those are your goals. Your goals are for your clients to pay you on time. Your goals are for your clients to do this. These are your goals, but your minimum standards are obviously lower than what you've written in your policy.
I use the excuse that I don't have the time to follow up with people who aren't complying with the things that they've agreed to do when they retain us. I say, oh, I know that they signed that they would, get all their documents to my paralegal, and she has to chase them down, but then we don't follow up. So I'm just not sure what's going on, why I tolerate that.
So what if you had a policy that you have 30 days to get us these documents, and if you don't get us these documents by 30 days, there's a $100 late fee?
And then someone would have to enforce that. And maybe it's I don't want to be a bad guy with these people who are telling me they want to save their house. So I'm not sure why I end up being the bad guy telling them, get me your pay stubs. Like it's not that hard, and I don't know why I'm making it hard. I always seem to make it hard.
The reason why we're talking about your house and your car and domestic services and the clients you work with and where you vacation and your employees and your social life and your friends and all this stuff is because I'm trying to get you all into the habit of thinking. Because if you're not thinking about these things, you are drifting. And if you're drifting around these things, then the devil is in control of your life. And you're living in a version of hell on earth. And if I can get you to define standards around simple things like the house you live in and the car you drive, if you can get into the habit of defining your standards in one part of your life, it will be easier to define the standards you want in all parts of your life. So I don't care where you start. Just start somewhere. If it's easier for you, start with something really innocuous. What are your minimum standards for the care of your dogs?
Well, 2 meals a day, 4 walks a day. I come home at lunch. I come home at lunch at least 4 times a week.
Okay, so if you left your dogs in the care of a friend or a family member, or if you paid someone, you'd say, these are the minimum standards for caring for my dogs. You got to feed them twice a day. You got to walk them twice a day. You got to play with them for at least an hour a day. Here are some examples of things that fall below my standards. Hitting them is below my standards. Kicking them is below my standards. Yelling at them is below my standards. The walk has to be, by the way, no less than 20 minutes, making that up, right? So you come back and you find out that your dogs were fed the same amount of food, but only once a day. And they were walked twice a day, but for 10 minutes and 10 minutes, not 20 minutes and 20 minutes. Does that person keep their job as your dog caretaker?
Probably not.
Because they fell below your standards, right? Do it for something simple. Do it for something, for your kids, or your dogs, or your cats, or your pets. Just start thinking about what your standards really are. And I promise you, if you start in any corner of your life, you'll start defining, you'll be able to define this in all the parts of your life eventually.
What's not connecting is we're living in a house. We could live in a smaller house. We don't have kids. We don't need the expense. We have more square footage than we actually need. We really like our house. We could live in something smaller. It wouldn't be a big deal. I could drive a smaller car. It wouldn't be that big a deal. So why am I tolerating my day-to-day at work being so excruciating? So I'm not connecting it. It's like I do demand certain things. We have someone clean our house. We hang around with the right people. I'm doing all these other things, but I'm allowing my job to just take everything out of me, and I'm constantly pulling out my hair, and my staff are not happy. with the clients and we're not bringing in the dollars we should be.
I think
So-
you're not really thinking about what your standards are. What's your minimum standards for staff performance? And the reason I think why you're not defining what your minimum standards for staff performance are is because I think you're afraid of what happens when or if your staff falls short of those minimum standards, then you got to fire them. Or before you fire them, you have to have some uncomfortable conversations with them about the fact that you are falling short of the minimum standards. Here's where, here's why, here's how. If you don't improve your performance, you will be fired.
Okay.
Try defining what your minimum standards are. And then tell your staff, these are the minimum standards. And then tell your CEO, or your COO, these are the minimum standards that I've established for my staff. These are the measurements that I'm going to use to determine whether they're meeting these minimum standards or not. And a month later, your CEO, your COO is going to say, how is your staff performing? Let's talk in terms of objective measurements. And if your staff falls below these objective measurements, your CEO, your COO is going to say, okay, we've agreed that if your staff falls below these minimum standards, you're going to have a meeting with them and call this to their attention. So when are we going to do that? And you may, what do you mean we? And you say, well, I'll be on the phone. Put me on speakerphone, and I'll be there to make sure that you actually have this conversation with your staff and don't wimp out. And then when you're going all kinds of wishy-washy bullshit with your staff, your CEO or your COO will speak up and say, excuse me, Sarah, we discussed that we needed to tell Bob, Mary, Susie, whatever, that our minimum standards are this. We've measured these performance indicators and they're falling below the minimum standards. Bob, Mary, Sue, whatever the name is, you understand that I am the outside CEO of this law firm, and that if you don't get your performance up to these standards, a month from now, we are going to have to let you go. At which point they say to Sarah, they look at you and they say, who the fuck is this? And then you can hide behind us. That's part of our job. That's the CEO of my law firm. That's my COO. That's the person I have to answer to if I let you fall below these minimum standards.
Right.
We will do that for you.
Okay.
There's no extra charge. That's what we're here for.
Okay. Thanks.
For real.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, we won't do that every single day, but you can clap. Yes.
Hi, RJon.
Hello.
I don't know if you remember the conversation we had at my VIP day back in September, that after having that VIP day in your nice home, was like, I gotta get out of my fucking house. That's the top priority, is we need to move and up-level our house.
Okay.
And we move. And
I remember you expressing that sentiment.
and we are moving in 7 days.
So what?
We are moving in 7 days.
Oh, congratulations.
And these are the specifications that my husband and I gave to our realtor. It has to be a minimum of 5,000 square feet, a 3-car garage, 3 designated bedrooms, a designated room for a gym, a large master closet, so maybe I'll let my husband move back into the master bedroom, or his stuff. He can sleep there, but his stuff doesn't. A jetted tub, a kitchen large enough for 3 people to prepare food simultaneously, luxury high-end appliances, a man cave, a designated home office, master bedroom large enough for a king bed with a sitting area, a fireplace in the master and living room, and double ovens in case I one day decide to cook again. And we checked all of those boxes in our new house. So
Now
if I-
just use the same level of specificity
for my business.
in your business.
That's the hard part.
Awesome. Thank you.
He was at the microphone before I was, if that's. Go ahead, man. Okay. I just had a comment. You mentioned that we should do this with something innocuous first, and I think that's a good way to sort of break this mental roadblock. I was really getting hung up on the housing thing because my minimum standard for housing is my house. So just as a maybe a comment that may benefit some others, I'm finding it a lot easier to set my standards for things I don't have. So I want a log cabin, and there are certain things I want in that log cabin. And that, for me, is a much easier exercise than deciding what I want in a house because I live in my house and it's good enough for me. So,
Is it good enough for you, or does it inspire you?
our house is fucking awesome, yeah.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I find that I have an easier time with some of these than with others, and I think I'm noticing the same thing in my business, so I thought it would be a good idea to come up here. For example, with the home, I think I was pretty specific. I think the measures are pretty objective. I think I could come back to this and check off the boxes and see if it satisfies it, but with other areas, I had more difficulty. And then I'm just kind of staring at it and coming up blank and not sure why that is, not sure what I could be doing differently in my thinking to break it down further and get more concrete points.
So what's the category you say again?
So for example, I did a good job with my home, did not such a good job with vacation or employees.
Let's go with vacation.
Okay.
What's your minimum standard for vacation?
I can't think of concrete things. It doesn't matter to me so much what the hotel is like. It's more.
It doesn't?
Not
Motel
re-
6?
No, I mean, so it's got to be clean.
Start off with that. It's got
Yeah.
to be clean. Does it need to have room service?
Yes.
Okay. Does it need to have a spa for a vacation? We're not talking about a business trip, we're talking about a vacation.
It depends whether it's a relaxing trip or like a tourism trip.
Okay, so a vacation, a relaxing vacation hotel. Got to have room service. It's got to be clean. Got to have room service. It's got to have a spa. At minimum, right?
Yes.
Okay. Does it have to have a concierge?
For a relaxing vacation, no, not necessarily.
Okay. Does it have to have like a TV you can like watch all kinds of movies in bed and relax and just sort of veg out?
Yes.
Okay. You might not know the difference between a 3-star, 4-star, or 5-star property. Does it need to be at least 4 stars?
I would say yes.
Does it need to be at least 5 stars?
Not necessarily.
Okay, so 4 stars. Does it need to be, do you need to have an ocean view?
Not necessarily.
If it's on the ocean, does it need to have an ocean view? If it's in the mountains, does it need to have a direct mountain view? Or are you content with a hotel on the ocean where you're looking at the parking lot? I don't care what your standards are, I'm just asking you.
Right.
Does it need to have a club level? Do you need to be on the club level, or is it okay to be below the club level? You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
So, I mean, that was helpful. Next time I'm trying to do this exercise, whether it's personal or for work, do you have any tips for getting through that mental block and coming up with more concrete
All
points?
right, here's I think the tip for everyone. You should be able to give your minimum standards to someone on your staff, and they should be able to execute on it, and you should be satisfied with whatever they bring you. So using the beer example, if the minimum standard is import or craft, whatever beer they bring, as long as it's an import or a craft, you don't get the right to complain because they met your minimum standards. Got it?
Yep.
Okay. We can keep going with Q&A for about another 10 or 15 minutes, but first I want to share an opportunity with you. And we can keep doing Q&A while you guys run to the back of the room. On June 1st through June 3rd, we are going to be running a sales training workshop to get you to have at least competent as your minimum standard for sales. That means that you will be able to go into a sale with a plan, with a strategy, with standards. You'll be able to have a systematic, organized way of approaching the sale. And if the sale doesn't work, you'll be able to know that it probably shouldn't have worked. That make sense? Comes with a 100% money back guarantee, and it's about half sold out. And if you want to get one of the last remaining spots and be better at sales, more comfortable at sales, you can go to the back of the room while we finish the Q&A. Where is it? It'll be in Miami. This is the sales competence workshop. This is not the sales laboratory intensive. This is the sales competence. If you've never taken a sales training course in your life, if you want to at least have a minimum standard of competence when it comes to sales, so you're not sweating it out and you're not winging it and you're not kind of going on a hope and a prayer, and if you want to be able to have a systematic, organized way of knowing why the sale worked, why the sale didn't work, this is a really great workshop for you to participate in. And I'll just say that if you're not at least competent at sales, I consider that to be a version of hell on earth, for real. Because being competent at sales gives you the courage you need to tell crazy clients, no thank you. Or a good client with the wrong case, no thank you. And to establish proper standards for pricing and other terms of your sale so you don't have people walking all over you and have major accounts receivables problems. If you don't have that in place, I don't have to imagine, because I know what it used to be like for me. It was very, very scary to turn down clients, and I accepted clients and I accepted work for fear of not being able to convert the next person who walked in the door. So get out of hell on earth, learn how to sell. Where are we next?
Okay, I have a question. I get the part that we're setting minimum standards for the employees and we're writing down our minimum standards so that if they fall below that, we get rid of them. Is part of the
No,
other...
if they fall below the minimum standards, you can measure their performance against those minimum standards. You can see if they're performing against those minimum standards and give them coaching, accountability, feedback, and an opportunity to raise their performance back up to those minimum standards.
Okay. So the other part of it, which I thought you were alluding to, but then, I might be missing it, is that if you set minimum standards, let's say for housing and car, that you're going to up your game to be able to afford that because you don't want to drop below the minimum standards. For example, you're going to collect money. You're not going to tolerate people in your office that aren't pulling their weight because now there's something more important because you're going to, if it means correcting that situation in your office or falling below your minimum standards, you're going to correct that situation in your office because you can't tolerate falling below that. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
When it's your minimum standard, then falling below the minimum standard isn't an option. Your
Yes.
only choice is live up to the minimum standard or live up to the minimum standard. There's nothing less that's tolerable.
Right. So let me give an example because several years ago, I bought a new house, which we loved, but I kept my old house, and rather than sell it, I rented it because I'm like, okay, if things don't work out here, I got a good deal on this house, I can always sell it and move back. But we didn't want to move back. Then,
So you didn't burn your ships.
Right.
Setting standards and burning your ships is sort of the same idea. So does everyone know the story about burning the ships?
Yes.
The army sailed across the sea to the enemy's land. And they got off their ships, and the general gave the order to set fire to the ships. And the ships started to burn. And the general brought the troops together and said, "Our ships are now burning. The only way out is to win. We either win or we die. There is no more retreat. The ships are burned." When your minimum standard is to live in the house that you're living in now, when your minimum standard is to drive the Tesla, when your minimum standard is to have a staff that performs up to this standard, when your minimum standard is to live however you want to live, there is no other option. And when there is no other option, you always find a way. You never don't find a way when there is no other option.
Yes.
See, the why is much more important to building a business than the how.
Yes. In fact, one thing which I kind of documented when I was up on stage at the last LQM, but I had a son that was born with disabilities. We had a lot of medical expenses. And unless I upped my game, I wasn't going to be able to stay in that house because I had a lot of other things. And I think...
Or you weren't going to be able to save his life.
Yes. So I think I don't know if this was on a subconscious level, but my income increased because I think subconsciously I just didn't tolerate the things that were going in my office, going on there that were uncomfortable, but now there was something more uncomfortable that made me do the things necessary to increase my revenue.
That is exactly the way it works. The reason why so many people in this room are putting up with the shit that they're putting up with is because they're willing to put up with the shit that they put up with. It's more comfortable to put up with the shit they put up with than to do the things they have to do to make it better. And then they make up stories about how they can't make it better, which is bullshit. They can make it better. It's just more comfortable to put up with shit than to make it better. And part of the reason that it's more comfortable to put up with the bullshit they put up with is because they're surrounded by people who make all the same excuses. And it's a lot easier to find people who will agree with your excuses than to find people who hold you to a higher standard. Most people won't hold you to a higher standard. Most people will go down in the gutter with you and commiserate on the excuses. It's easier to settle it's harder to live up to your standards. When you live up to your standards, people say you're unreasonable. When you live up to your standards, people say, you're single-minded. When you live up to your standards, people say you're a snob. When you live up to your standards, people say you're ruthless. When you live up to your standards, people say all kinds of negative things about you to make themselves feel better about the fact that they're not. When you go through life and you don't know how to sell legal services, and because you don't know how to sell legal services, you got a whole bunch of shitty clients who you settle for, and because you don't know how to sell legal services, you sabotage your own marketing, and because you don't know how to sell legal services, you can never hire a dragon to do it for you. It's easy to go to a bar association and find a bunch of other lawyers who don't know how to sell legal services, who are incompetent at sales, and put up with shitty clients, and put up with inconsistent and unpredictable cash flow, and all the pains and humiliations that go with it. It's easy to find those people. The hard part, it's hard to find people who hold you to higher standards. You didn't burn your ships with the house.
No.
But your son's needs did the same job for you. You couldn't fall. Parents in the room. I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to give me an instant answer. Instant. Before you even think about it, just give me the answer. Yes. Go to the back of the room. I don't know what I'm going to the back of the room for. You said yes. It's an implied contract. I know this is a cliche, but it's really true. I want you to imagine, for real, someone kidnapped your child. I know this is a horrible, excruciating thing to think about, but I want you to imagine that it happened. And the only way to save your child's life was to come up with $1 million in the next 90 days. Yes or no? Yes. Yes. Who said no? You got kids? Okay, well, for everyone else. You see, you've already decided you're coming up with $1 million. Once you decide you're going to come up with the money, and the only choices are yes or yes, you cut through all your bullshit and you find a way to make it happen. Will you do something embarrassing to get the money to save your kid? Will you do something unethical to get the money to save your kid? Yes. Will you do something illegal to get the money to save your kid?
Yes.
Will you wipe your ass with the bar rules if that's what it takes to get the money to save your kid? Yes. So you can all get the $1 million, and you all would get the $1 million, and you'd swallow your pride, and you would do whatever you have to do. So now you can't say you can't do it. Now you just have to say, there's certain rules I won't break in order to do it. Right? And I'm here to tell you, everyone with $1 million firm, do me a favor, stand up. I'm here to tell you that it is enormously disrespectful to everyone you see standing. It is disrespectful to these people. Look at these men and women. They're black, they're white, there's Asian, there's Hispanic, there's men, there's women, they're older, they're younger, all different practice areas. And it is disrespectful to these men and women for you to say that it's somehow easier for them to do it, and that's why they can do it and you can't. Do you understand how disrespectful it is when you make an excuse for why they can do it and you can't? Oh, they can do it because they're white and I'm black. Well, there's black people standing up. Oh, they can do it because they're men and I'm women. Well, there's women standing up. Well, they can do it because because they don't have any young kids. Well, there's people with young kids standing up. Oh, they can do it because there's no one in their life who's got a disability or any kind of challenges. Well, there's people in this room who are standing up, and I'm not going to name anyone, who have people they're taking care of who have disabilities and all kinds of other challenges. Whatever excuse you've got, there's someone standing up with $1 million firm in this room or somewhere else who's got the same kind of challenges, and they're making it happen. And the only difference between you and them is that they have taken all their excuses and shoved them up their ass. They've found a reason to do it, and you have found it more comfortable and more convenient to make an excuse. Because their standards are higher than yours, and you allow your standards to be lower than theirs. It's that simple. Guys with $1 million firm, am I telling the truth? Yes. And if we're being really honest with ourselves, didn't we used to make the same excuses? Yes. So when you don't, if you don't have what you want to have in your business, you could say you don't want it enough. I accept that. You could say you don't want it at all, and I accept that. You could say it's not convenient, and I accept that. You could say it's uncomfortable. You can say it's embarrassing. You can say it's inconvenient. Hey, everyone with $1 million firm, did you have to do things that were uncomfortable? Yes. Embarrassing? Yes. Inconvenient? Scary? Thank you.
RJon, my question kind of ties into
And one of the things we had to learn, is we had to learn how to sell. And if you're sitting there and you're struggling financially and you don't know how to grow your firm and you haven't taken a course on how to sell, get up and go to the back of the room. Because it's not going to teach it by itself. Yes.
So when we're talking about what we tolerate and then raising our standards, when you were talking about burning the ships, that was kind of my question, because the only way that I've ever up-leveled or raised my standard was literally like tying myself to the train and committing to something even before I had the money or the ability. Like when I bought my house last year, I really didn't even have the money until I decided I was going to move. But it continually puts me in a perpetual state of like stress when I'm constantly burning the ships behind me.
Yeah, and?
And then whenever I'm thinking about the things I've written down now that I want to get, I think, well, the only way I know how to do it is just to commit to them, even though I don't know how I'm going to pay for them.
You do know how you're going to pay for them.
And why does that happen in my head?
Why does what happen in your head?
Like I resist.
Because you have not become comfortable being uncomfortable yet.
Okay.
Because you're still developing your entrepreneurial maturity. Because part of developing entrepreneurial maturity is becoming comfortable being uncomfortable.
There's no other advice you can give? No other tricks to becoming more comfortable being uncomfortable? Or do you just keep burning those ships? That's just what it is. It's going to be uncomfortable.
Look, I mean, everything that you are comfortable doing now was probably uncomfortable for you at one time. Is that true?
Everything I'm doing now that's comfortable?
Everything that's comfortable for you now was probably at one time uncomfortable.
Yes.
You wear high heels. Was it comfortable when you first started wearing high heels?
Probably. Yeah, I mean, I don't remember when was that.
You drive a car. Is it comfortable for you to drive a car?
Yeah.
Can you remember the first time you drove a car?
Yeah.
Was it a little bit nerve-wracking the first time you drove a car?
Yeah.
I mean, we could go on and on and on through a whole bunch of things in your life that were once uncomfortable for you that now you take for granted and you become comfortable with.
Okay.
These are going to be the last two questions.
Mine
Or
is
you?
similar to what the previous member was just talking about. In February, I, for the first time, got an eviction notice because I was late on rent. And from then on, up until as I'm going through my list, I was saying, I'm going to move to a cheaper apartment. And I'm going through my list for my standards of,
So you're willing to lower your standards rather than step up and do what you have to do to make the money to pay the rent.
and I'm telling myself I'm living above my means.
That's the story you use to justify lowering your standards.
Yeah.
What if that wasn't an option for you?
And that's what this exercise is showing me, is that as I'm going through the standard of how I want to be living in my current apartment, my apartment checks all these boxes, but it's still tough to think about the rent payment.
So let me ask you a couple questions.
Yeah.
Do you have clients that owe you money?
No.
Do you have clients that came in to hire you, didn't hire you, and they're probably still wandering around out there with the same problem?
Yes.
Okay, so it's more comfortable for you. You're willing to move to a cheaper apartment than pick up the phone and call some of those clients and bring them back in.
So we do that. We do our win-back calls.
Okay. Do you have staff that don't meet their billable hour requirements? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, there's plenty of work to do, and they're not doing enough work, so your firm doesn't generate enough revenue, and so you don't take enough profit to pay your rent, and you would prefer to move to a cheaper apartment than have an uncomfortable conversation with your staff about meeting their billable hour requirements.
Yeah, when you say it back to me.
How much do you pay one of your staff per hour?
$13 an hour.
And how much do they generate per hour?
It's more like administrative stuff, so not very much per hour.
Let's talk about someone who's billable.
I'm a solo.
Okay, so you pay someone $13 an hour, and how much do you bill per hour?
My billable rate?
Yes, your billable
$300.
rate. $300. So you pay someone, let's say $20 an hour,
Mm-hmm.
and that $20 an hour person frees you up to generate $300 an hour. Yeah?
Yeah.
And you got plenty of work to do. And you got clients who are disappointed that the work isn't getting done quicker. So for every hour that your administrative assistant frees you up, you can generate $280 of gross profit. Right?
Right.
How much cheaper is the rent going to be on the other apartment versus the apartment you want to be in?
Maybe like $1,000 a month.
$1,000. So 4 hours. So all your administrative assistant has to do is free you up for 4 hours a month, and you don't have to move to the cheaper apartment. But that requires you to have an uncomfortable conversation with your administrative assistant. But rather than doing that, you'd rather pack up all your shit and move to a cheaper apartment. Right?
Right, until today.
I guess my question is, I'm trying to figure out, when you said earlier, you will do without if you can't have your minimum standards. How long do you do without? Because it seems to me that seems to be the conundrum. If if my employee is not doing good enough right now, and she's not, and we'll have that conversation on Monday. But if she's not doing the job, I get rid of her. I don't have someone else who I know can do what she has to do. I got to retrain somebody. So how long do I ride that train? Do I just chuck them out and say, hey, look, we'll just have to suffer along until I get somebody? Because I can endure a lot of suffering because I've done that for a long time and not made money. So now I'm trying to minimize the amount of suffering that I do and make money. So,
all right. So you're kind of in this vicious cycle.
Indeed.
So if the standard was, I'm not doing the job of an administrative assistant. That's below my minimum standards. And I'm not tolerating an administrative assistant who does less than this standard.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Then you would be more thoughtful and careful and deliberate about who you hire. You'd be more thoughtful, careful, and deliberate about how you onboard them. You'd be more thoughtful, careful, deliberate about how you train them and the policies and the procedures that you give them. You'd be more thoughtful, careful, and deliberate about the coaching, the management, the feedback that you give them, and the accountability that you give them. You'd be more honest with them about their performance. Because if not doing the work yourself, if doing the work yourself is simply not an option, and putting up with bullshit is not an option, then the only alternative you give yourself is to do a better job of hiring and do a better job of managing. But now that this has gotten into this like in this vortex, and now you're sort of in this other loop of either I put up with shit or I do it myself.
Exactly where I am.
What about putting up with shit from the assistant you have while you hire someone better?
The concern that I have is that I will stay tolerating the bullshit because I'm concerned. And understand that the nature of my practice is I do most of it myself. My sister is my law partner, and she does the PI side. This is her assistant who has begun to work for my cases and screw them up significantly enough that she can't do it anymore. But
like I said, what if you work your way out of this hell on earth that you've allowed yourself to slip into?
Right.
Is I will put up with I will acknowledge that I have this relatively low minimum standard, and I will make a plan to improve my standard. And the way that I will improve my standard is I will put up with this shit for 2 more months. And while I'm putting up with this shit for 2 more months, I'm going to hire someone better. And once I get this better person in place, I'm getting rid of the lower standard and making my standards go up.
All right, we'll give that a shot. We'll see how that works. Well, I mean, it's the only option I have, I guess.
What you're describing is the effect of not being more thoughtful about what your minimum standards are. And, when you're in the middle of a pile of shit, you got no choice. You got to dig shit. You got to shovel shit to get your way out. Right?
Right.
But once you get out of that, if your standard is I'm never going to land in a pile of shit again, then you're more thoughtful, then you're more careful. Think about if you were going to jump out of an airplane with a parachute.
Okay.
If you were going to jump out of an airplane with a parachute and your life depended on it, would you be as careless or casual or indifferent about supervising the packing of the parachute as you were when you hired that assistant or trained that assistant or gave feedback and coaching to that assistant?
I understand what you're saying. No, I agree.
Of course not. See, what happens is, and I want everyone to really pay attention to this, what happens is when you start living your life this way, people start thinking you're an asshole. And if you do a Glassdoor review of how to manage a small law firm, you'll see a whole bunch of people who used to work for me who think that I'm an asshole. I'm not an asshole. I just have standards. And when I see the beginning of a problem, I nip it in the bud. And they say, why are you being so why are you being so impatient? Well, I'm being impatient today because I know that your bullshit is going to fuck up my life 6 months from now. And long before your bullshit has fucked up my life, you will probably have quit or gotten fired, and you won't be around when the shit finally hits me in the face. Years ago, Allie and I had a very different attitude. Live and let live. And we had this beautiful plan to take the month of December off. This was December of 2011 or 2012, forgot which. And you know what I did in the month of December? What I did for Christmas, Hanukkah, and New Year's of that year? I worked my fucking ass off. That's what I did. Late at night, I was pulling all fucking nighters. That's what I did in December. Why? Because I gave some breaks to some assholes in November, and I gave some breaks to some assholes in October, and I gave some breaks to some assholes in July, and I gave some breaks to some assholes in February, and I gave some breaks to some... I was giving people breaks, and you know what? Everyone liked me. He's such a great boss, he gave me a break. I see it. He's so nice, he gave me a break, I gave all my breaks away. And it came to the end of the year, and I had no breaks left, because I gave them all away to other people. None of those people offered to come in at night to help me. None of those people offered to come in on the weekends to help me. None of those people offered to come in on Christmas or New Year's to help me. So now I have more entrepreneurial maturity. Now I understand that when I see the beginning of the problem, I solve it. But they think I'm an asshole. But I'm not living my life for them. I'm living my life for me. And I'm living my life for my family. And I'm living my life for my standards, not their standards. Make sense?